Hello, this is Neil Bolger, and welcome back to the Redcar Learning Path. Today we are going to be going over a introduction to Tableau, and we are going to look at Tableau with field monitoring data. And what I'm going to get into is some examples on how to apply Tableau to energy analysis using it in field studies or in retro commissioning type applications. A lot of the examples you'll see in the data we're going to use as a reference would be available from an energy monitoring system or a building management system that you might get out into a CSV file. So I'll try and make it general where I can, but also specific to the tasks that we do a lot of here at Redcar. Um, so the content we're going to discuss, and it will be over multiple videos, is how to use Tableau for viewing data. I'm going to give an introduction to just how to use Tableau for somebody that's never used it, and we'll look at a few things there. And then we're going to go into this, what is data cleaning? We're going to talk about this process of data cleaning and some key items there that we're going to go into on how and why and what tools we have. And then I'm going to make a few videos on Tableau Prep, which is a complementary tool to the Tableau Creator, Tableau Desktop application. And the sole purpose of that tool is to do a little bit of functioning related to either data cleaning or pivoting data and things like that. So with that, I'm going to also give a shout out to the Tableau software website itself. There are lots of great videos for free if you do have Tableau. Just to understand more about the interface, I would definitely recommend these 3 getting started videos. And then there's several here on Tableau Prep. I would almost recommend going through all of these. When you start to look at each one, each one is not terribly long, and I found them quite helpful. There's more advanced ones down below on understanding calculations, how to use stories beyond just dashboards, and so on and so forth. The rest I would let you, kind of hunt and choose what you find to be most valuable if you're using this for, like I said, energy analysis. But at least these first couple ones I would highly recommend as a good complementary background to what we're going to look at. So with that, I am going to look at we're going to use some of this raw data. I just pulled a few files that we're going to use as an example. And so each one of these files that I actually currently have here is for either one single trend or several trends. And I'll just open this Excel, and then we're going to pull these into Tableau and look at the same data. So we can see here, this is kind of what the file looks like. It has time, this date time on the left, and then it has 2 fields of my named data points here with amps going down. So with that, I'm just going to close. Basically all the files look like this. The timestamps are a little different, and we'll get into that. But even right away, so you can import almost any file into Tableau. And so we're just going to jump in and import these CSV files and start from there. I'm going to pause for a second. All right, so when you open Tableau, it will show you your old workbooks you've worked on, but if you don't have any, this will be blank. And so immediately what we need to do is connect to data. And so right now we're actually going to connect these text files, which these CSV files are considered text files. And I'm going to navigate back to my folder. And in here, let's just bring in this first one that has temperature and humidity. And so what that's going to do is bring it in and add those columns here. And what we're now looking at is our workbook. We're looking at our data source. So you'll always be able to come back to this view of the data by clicking this far left button, the data source. And in here we can see some things that recognize this as time. It won't always do that. It depends on how it's set up. And we'll talk more about time in the future. And then it recognizes these as numbers already. Sometimes it recognizes things as text instead of a number, and you can actually change the type of data stream that this is. So you can see for CSV files, it will also find any file in that same folder, and we'll talk more about importing multiple CSV files in a future video, but that's why these other files show up here. It's basically saying, hey, we found these. Do you also want to bring these into your working workbook? But currently we just have this file. So I'm going to go to Sheets, So a sheet here, if we added another worksheet, we can see they all look the same. This is where we can actually start to do analysis or look at the data and make a view into the data. So Tableau organizes things into dimensions, which would be date and time. Sometimes I also think of dimensions, another word I use sometimes would be the attributes. So not the data itself, but perhaps metadata. So right now we just have date and time. In the future we may have more categories. And then down here it actually put all the numbered files here. We can see carbon dioxide temperature, conference rooms. So the way this works is you drag some of the data either to rows or columns. And here if I was to put the temperature data, by default it's going to sum all my data. If I want to change the sum to be an average or the median, you could right click it and do average. So we can now see it's 72 degrees is the average. And it's averaging all the data I have. So it defaults to whatever type it thinks best, but we could change this to a line. We could change it to a circle. I'm going to go back to line. And I'm now going to drag my date column, which thankfully it was in the right format to know that it was a date, up to columns. And so now we can see I have 2 years of data here. And this data type of knowing that there's time is very powerful because in Tableau it knows how to collapse time. And what I mean is right now it's averaging everything into years. And so if I change this to be months, we can now see I have data across January, February, March, April, May, December, November, December. And so we can now start to see 6 columns worth of data. Another thing here is as you add to it, this chart will grow. If you wanted to fill up the whole window, you can change this at the top to say the entire view. You don't always want to do that, but generally speaking, it's pretty good to just change this to entire view. So I'm going to go ahead and change this to be day. And so what's happening here is you can actually see now the average of all of the first of the month, second of the month, third of the month. And so the first thing we're going to learn here in Tableau is thinking about time. And so I'm going to just pause here for a second and look at this. So there are 2 sets of time. The first here, year, quarter, month, day, these will plot every May in your data set, no matter what year. Or on day, it will plot just like one instance of the 8th day, no matter how many 8 days there were. This set of year, day, month is more what I say is like an absolute data set. So if we were to do day here, it will actually plot the unique day, and now we can see November 2nd, 12th, 22nd. So it's plotting every single day of our data set, which is a lot more data than we otherwise had. I'm going to pause. And so I'm going to change this as a demonstration to be hour, and now we can start to see every hour of every day. Even if it's all compressed here, we can start to see the data here. So that's just one way to kind of use this powerful time step. I actually think there is minute data in here, but it probably won't change how this looks, just given that it's so compressed. So that's one way to look at data. And if you were to drag more things, carbon dioxide up here, it will add a second plot below. You can see these capsules, these pill capsules. So now we're looking at CO2 on this lower graph. And if we were to continue to drag more data sets, it's just going to do the same thing. It's going to do like one versus the other, adjacent to the other. And we'll get into how to overlay them. But that's the basic way. So we're now looking at basically all the trend data in this CSV file. Another thing that can be helpful is you can zoom in on this data, and effectively the art of zooming in is just filtering the amount of data you're looking at. And so over here we have not talked about this middle pane, but here we have lots of things. So here we have the ability to modify how the data looks in these marks, and then up here is this window called filter. So I'll start with filter, and we're going to drag date and time, and we're just going to for now pick ranges of date. I'm going to stick with the default that it comes up with, the range of dates, which goes from the beginning to the end of the dates I found. And when I hit OK, I'm now viewing the same amount of dates because I started beginning and end. But now I want to be able to see my filter. I want to show my filter. I'm going to right click and it brings it up over here. And you can now drag, you can actually drag this filter around the screen and decide where you want to put it. I usually put time and date at the top so I have the largest little tool to drag. So it's the widest it can be. And so what I did there was I actually, cut off some of the data. So here I'm going to try and zoom into a couple days. This is about 10 days. So now we're only looking at 10 days. We can see down here January to January. And we are looking at that same data set. I had it set to minutes. In this instance, had it been a day, you may want to come down here and change this to be hour or minute. But that's essentially the way to zoom in to the data to try and observe an anomaly. So filters are really powerful. And you can show and hide filters. We also could do filters with the data. So let's say instead of looking at all the data, we knew we only wanted to see the temperature when the CO2 was above a certain threshold. You could even drag a data set from here up there. And just for example, let's say we only want to look at the CO2 when it was above 600 to the maximum. So I'm going to type in 600. And now, in this instance, it probably helps to change from a line to more of a circle. So we can just see the data points we do have, and there isn't a false sense of a continuing data stream. I don't really know what we're able to see by doing this level of filtration, but just wanted to demonstrate how filters work. And you can see here that filter kind of comes up again on the right. So I'm going to take that filter off. Some other things we could do, we have the options to change the color of the chart. Again, you can actually change the color relative to these other properties. So for instance, it's probably again not the best overlay, but if we said instead of plotting CO2 here, we want to do CO2 as the color, it's now saying that a darker color dot represents higher CO2 and a lighter color represents lower CO2. So we can actually see that the conference room during the middle of the day, that makes sense, gets darker. Instead of color, you could have chosen size. Probably, again, not the best metric for size, but basically you're adding a filter overlay to this data. So a common thing that we would be doing is looking at temperature and even adding a label of what the temperature value is. And so what I just did there was I actually clicked and held Control on my keyboard to make a copy of this data set, and I dragged it to the label. And that created a separate pill, but it's the same pill as this one. And you just got to make sure you update these if you ever change what you're looking at in rows, because you can end up plotting another data set on top of another data set, as an example. But anyways, this is a way to now start to see some of the data. And Tableau will know to filter out to only show you some of the data, so it's not overlapping everywhere. You can check this box that allows you to overlap all the data, but it's chaotic. But basically, so some other things in Tableau that are very common. Let's say we did want to keep this view, but we didn't want 78.18. You could format almost anything by right-clicking on it, selecting Format, and here you're now at this panel, or this pane, and you can start to make choices about, I want it to be a number, I don't want to see decimal places, and now it's kind of rounding them. So that's a short overview of Tableau. There's lots and lots you can do, though this is the quick introduction. We can see here now I'm averaging all my months. But so that's just one, sheet. So this we might end up calling this temperature. And now you may want another sheet for CO2 or something else. So this is just one view into the data. We'll get into more things, but what I do want to bring up here is, let's see, another way. Oh yeah, so this is visually looking at the plotted data, but you can also, in Sheets, we can also look at it similar to how it looked in Excel. So if we took the temperature data in this example and just put it on text, And then we put date time on the rows, and we change this to be minute. It's going to default to these lines, but I'm going to force it to go back to text. And it's got to think for a second. I'm going to hit pause. So it came up, and now it's a huge mess of data, but what we're going to do is we're just going to say fit width instead of standard. Actually just moved in the middle, so I think what I'm trying to do is not have all the numbers overlapped on themselves. And so what I really want is actually I need to change the type of view for this time step. And basically what I need to do is change this from viewing this data as continuous data to viewing this as discrete data. And what that will do, it'll snap here. We can now see it will make a nice table where it now actually shows me all my data the same way we would almost see it in Excel. And so we can see this is a very long table that we can now kind of examine visually. At this view, you can also copy this table to Excel. It's not the fastest, but the ways you do this is you would go worksheet, and you could copy the data. Usually I copy the cross table. You can direct it to export to Excel as well, but usually if you want to go back to Excel at this view, copying the cross table is your best bet. So that's a rough overview of Tableau. In the next video, I'm going to go over a couple more advanced tricks we can do just to look at data in Tableau, and then we'll talk about cleaning.